One of the big stories in the beef market in the U.S. in 2015 was really trade, both imports and exports. Our beef imports were the largest in a decade, really driven by several different factors, one of which, of course, was the record high beef prices in the U.S. It makes us an attractive market. And when you throw in a stronger U.S. dollar, which also creates that incentive to pull more beef in our market with high prices, the dollar, and weaker worldwide economies that indirectly affect how much beef is offered for sale to the U.S. Those three really combine to create this incentive to bring even more beef in to the U.S. And we're going to throw in one other factor, and that is much of the growth in imports really came from Australia. They shipped a record amount of beef to the U.S. in 2015, and it was really driven by some of these other indirect effects of weaker economies in Asia that they may have sent beef to, but also driven by a large drought in Australia that forced herd liquidation over the last 2 or 3 years. And that's something I think we can relate to here, a herd liquidation forced by drought. So it left a lot of beef supplies looking for a home, and with record high prices, we were very much an attractive market. And that really surged our beef imports. In fact, imports were the largest in a decade. They were well above our exports, which also declined in 2015, really for the same reasons. When we have record high prices, it's hard to sell as much beef in world markets. And so really for the same things caused more imports and declining exports. Yet for that whole story, as we get into the last part of 2015, the last 3 months, we really had a situation where our imports really started to decline sharply. Particularly when we get into December, we actually got to the point where our imports from Australia were down over 50%. We were down almost 40% year over year from New Zealand. So really those supplies offered into the U.S. or brought into the U.S. really started drying up. And by the last 3 months of the year, we were actually exporting more beef by volume than we were importing. So we really had a pretty sharp turn at the very end of the year. Yet that surge of imports overall was more than 700 million pounds more beef on our market from the net trade situation than a year ago. That's more than 2 pounds per capita that we were trying to sell domestically just when our own beef production was increasing, and really that caused prices to decline as well. One of the interesting things in terms of trade also that encourages those imports, we talk about record high beef prices, were also extremely high prices or record high prices for beef that we're going to grind into hamburger. That's something that we as Americans like hamburgers. With historically tight supplies of cows, tight supplies of cattle, we had very tight supplies, and so those high prices really show up dramatically in terms of forcing some more imports in our market. Yet we see those prices for that 90% lean beef that would be ground into hamburger decline sharply with imports and with some growing supplies. We often talk about exchange rates in as a part of the story in driving trade. If we look at exchange rate, the dollar versus the Australian dollar, over the last couple of years we've had about a 30% appreciation or so in the US dollar versus their currency, and that really provided a lot of impetus to bring in more of that Australian beef. So for the coming year, I think we're going to be looking at a couple of changes that are going to affect our beef market as well. I think most market analysts expect that we're going to import less beef in 2016 than we did in 2015. We also tend to think that our exports are going to be up a little bit as some of these price relationships do change. So one of the effects then of less imports on our market is I think it's really going to help us offset growing domestic beef production as our herd begins to increase, as some of those more calves get through feedlots and heavier weights contribute to more U.S. beef production. We may not have to compete with as much imports as we did in 2015. So I think on balance that'll be a story we want to watch as well and see how that changes in 2016. But I think we're going to have a little better picture for helping our own domestic beef prices as a trade situation changes a little bit. If you want some more information on this story and the charts that go with it, take a look at this website, and you can find this story and the charts there.